Neem, can you hear me?
Hello?
Oh, Neem, thank you so much. Welcome to Morning Glory on Talk. Tell me about the levels of anger in Ireland at the moment about illegal immigration.
So I think that there's probably a very familiar pattern happening here, especially in regard to what you're seeing over there in Britain. And what Ireland is a much smaller country, of course, with a much smaller population, and the changes here are absolutely unprecedented. So you have enormous demographic changes, not only occurring in relation to illegal immigration, but also in relation to legal immigration. And it's estimated now that almost a quarter of people living in Ireland weren't born here. So this is, unprecedented kind of sea change. And a lot of people in Ireland, a lot of ordinary people feel that these changes have happened very quickly and without any kind of consultation. And then when it comes to illegal immigration, which is mostly people coming here, as you're seeing in your own country, claiming asylum, there's an awful lot of other issues that are arising as well. And what we saw in City West this week, and what we saw in Dublin previously with the Dublin riots, was, I think, flashpoints that sometimes miss the bigger picture, if you like, because people in City West aren't protesting because they're opposed to migrants or they hate people who are different to them. They're protesting because the very things that they said would happen are now happening. And they're really, really, really angry with the government.
That's right. And we've got this terrible case of a 10-year-old girl who was allegedly sexually assaulted near a facility housing asylum seekers. And it seems that there's been deafening silence from most of the media in Ireland and the political establishment.
Yeah, so it's actually really extraordinary. So, what you have to understand is, what do we know about the case? What we know about the case is that it involves a 10-year-old girl. And I think most of your listeners will understand that there's almost an immediate visceral reaction to news like that.
Yeah.
Many of us have had daughters of that age. We know people of that age. They're children. A 10-year-old, you're a small child, and I think the thought of somebody of someone that age being sexually assaulted is just horrific. Your instinct is it's a very visceral instinct. And then we know that the person who is accused of assaulting her, allegedly assaulting her, is an asylum seeker from Africa. And we know that there was a deportation order issued against that person in March of this year, and that deportation order clearly didn't take effect, whether it was because it's being appealed, and of course these appeals all take place funded by the taxpayer, or whether it was because it was simply ignored, as so often has been the case in this country. But this case isn't happening in isolation. Several days before that, we had this absolutely horrific case where a young Ukrainian who came here, and some of the correspondents writing about this are speculating whether he came here to avoid being drafted, to avoid conscription into the war with Russia, to avoid being sent to the front, in other words, and being killed. And he was here just a matter of days, 3 or 4 days. He was staying in accommodation which is run by TUSLA, which is our child and family agency. And he was attacked by another person who was staying in the same apartment.
So a Ukrainian goes to Ireland to be safe and is attacked by a migrant.
He was attacked by another unaccompanied minor, in other words, someone who was under 18, who was a migrant, who was staying in the apartment run by TUSLA. And it was a particularly, and I'm not trying to be gratuitous here, it was a particularly horrific attack. He was stabbed more than 100 times. The post-mortem took longer because the attack was so violent and so vicious. And a young Somalian is being questioned about that murder. And that happened just days before this young girl was allegedly seriously sexually assaulted in City West. Now, the people who live around City West is an enormous asylum complex. It's not a house or a small centre. Up to 1,000 people can
and of course, it's a former popular hotel.
It's a former popular hotel, and the people who live in City West have long been, and they're like the other communities you mentioned there. There are people, there's been no consultation. Like, basically what people were told for the last 4 or 5 years, when these numbers started to rocket completely out of control, we went from bringing in 2,000 asylum seekers, 2,000, 3,000 asylum seekers a year, to climbing up to 13,000 and almost up to 20,000 in a year. And it happened so fast, and basically Irish people were told, no veto and you have no consultation. You have to just put up and shut up. And the people in City West have been campaigning for years now, and they've been completely ignored by the political establishment, completely ignored. They've done everything right. They've held public meetings, they've organised petitions. Like
peaceful protests as well.
Peaceful protests as well. They did everything they could the right way, and they were ignored. And they warned that this would happen, because in one of the meetings that they held, Gript, who I work for, went down to report on that meeting. And normally these local meetings, which are always packed, which always represent the entire village or town or suburb where this is happening almost, or at least a very large percentage of them, they're normally ignored by the rest of the media. And at that particular meeting, women in particular stood up and said, we don't feel safe anymore. We're being followed. Photographs have been taken of us. Remarks have been made to us. One woman said, I now run to get my train every morning. I don't feel safe.
This is Ireland, for goodness sake. This is the Republic of Ireland, which I mean, my family are Irish, Neem, and you know, childhood holidays to Ireland. What have you got? You've got a beautiful country with amazing people, a small, homogenous, white Roman Catholic population. No great allergy to immigration, but clearly at this scale, it's deeply destructive. I mean, I've heard about small towns in Ireland where they've had their population double overnight because of busloads of asylum seekers done at night so as to avoid public anger. With the clock against us, Niamh, how do you see this playing out in Ireland?
Well, I think it's interesting because, just as you said earlier, largely the media want to move the sexual assault of this girl just as they moved the stabbing, something that had never happened before in this country. You know, small children were stabbed outside their school.
These are not Irish crimes.
And that led to the Dublin riots. They want to move the horror of what's happening to small children, to Ukrainian teenagers, and then to young girls. They want to move that off the front pages and the entire focus to be on people who get very upset and then get out of control. Like, most of the people in City West are not throwing rocks or engaging in violent protests. Most of the people there, just as in everywhere else throughout the country, just want the government to listen. They don't want enormous asylum centres in their area. So the government needs to get real here. They need to pause any more asylum seekers coming into the country, and then they need to listen to what people are saying. I would just say this finally to you, that it's estimated that 22,000 asylum seekers are in Ireland and came here without any passport or identification. We don't know who these people are, and yet they are being put into communities and people feel unsafe, and people must be listened to.
What has happened to one of the safest, most beautiful countries in the world is a true crime on the part of many administrations, and Ireland exists as a warning to the world. Neamh, I hope you'll join us again in the near future, because it's been very compelling to hear your overview of this. An Irish politician based in Dublin, Neamh Ibreen, thank you for your time.